Hello, check. 1 2 1 2 3. Hello, 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 check. Test 1 2 3. Hello, 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 check. Hello, hello,
Hello, hello, hello, 1 2 3, hello, 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 hello.
Okay, we are announcing without the teams. They are holding up the tournament. Mahesh.
Hi, I had the privilege to chair open semi-finals of this tournament. At opening government, we had IIT Bombay, opening opposition Mitochondria, CG IGNU, and COVIT. Judging with me were Arohi, Akshad, Banu, Nimay, and after considering every team, the first team that is the finalist of a tournament which had more than 120 teams is opening government, which is IITB. The second team progressing to open finals on a unanimous decision again is the team at closing opposition.
Okay, Mohit.
Hi everyone, I'm Mohit. I was chairing OSF in room 2. With me on panel, I had Bia, Shaurya, Sudiksha, and Varsha. On opening government, we had UNSW, Mohan, and TY. On opening opposition, we had IITB, Kicha, and Mehta. On CG, we had Adha Lal Salam. On CO, we had Clean Shaven Cause Our Beards in Delhi. On a unanimous call, the teams proceeding to open grand finals are the teams on closing half. Congratulations.
So that is Adal Al Salam and Clean Shaven Cause Our Beards in Delhi. Okay, okay, listen. 8 minutes is what you have got. 6-5 is when the motion releases.
I want to know. Can we look at tabs here? Can we look at the results order? Oh. I don't believe this. Who was the other team with Shona? Shona and Shona. They are responsible. Correct answer. We couldn't. Correct answer. You were straight right to that? Yeah. You all quit. I get it. I am not today. It's just insane. I now have to watch finals. Yeah. What were you thinking? I need to go get my laptop and start work. For what? For the mood court thing, I have a meeting at 10 and I have to fill.
Okay, the draw for the grand final is public. Yeah, okay, okay, fine. Bad luck. Yeah, yeah, sure. One team is solving some equity issue, some digital problem. Never mind. Too bad. I'll just. Yeah, it's here. Sure, but okay. Motions. Wait, last call. OG, are you here? Yes, start motion now. Okay, CG is coming. Oh, are you here? Clean shaven. Okay, CO. Okay, we are waiting for O to come back from the washroom and then we begin. Sorry, are there? Sorry, we are waiting for CG. My bad. My bad. Yes. Do we have? We do. We do. Okay. Yes, we do. Sorry. Of course, you have to submit phones. We are waiting for them to come and then we'll do it. Phones. Guys, phones. Okay, you all of you take a toilet break, come back in 2 minutes. We have beard like class monitors. Go to the toilet break.
Give us our phone.
Okay, time to start. OG, are you here? Adha Lal Salam. Oh, are you here? Clean shaven? Okay, washroom. CG, are you here? IITB? Oh God. CO is here. Please, the OG CO stay here. आ गए अच्छा phones. OG phones. Yes, yes. Oh.
Jesus Christ.
Sorry, oh phones. Okay, motion time.
I think so. We'll let you know.
Okay, yeah, can start. Sorry? Yeah, 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 take the motion paper. Don't open it. Finals teams, take your motions, printed. Don't open it, stay here, stay here. Stay here. Guys, take your motion. Shaurya, take your motion. Harshit Mahar, motion. Okay. Your theme for open finals is Indian politics. Okay. Several of India's state parties are experiencing visible internal disputes. Examples include clashes between K.T. Ramarao and K. Kavita within the BRS in Telangana, Tejasvi and Tej Pratap Yadav within the RJD in Bihar. The NCP split into the Sharad Pawar faction and the Ajit Pawar faction in Maharashtra. Akhilesh Yadav's feud with Shivpal Yadav in Uttar Pradesh, etc. With that as your context, your motion reads, this House regrets the rise of internal disputes within political dynasties in India's state parties. Time right now is 6:16. Debates will start at 6:31. Good luck. I mean, dependent upon consent from people. Yeah. We'll do that. All spectators, can you leave the first 3 rows empty and start sitting from the 4th row onwards?
Hi, hi. If you are not a speaker in the grand finals, we need the first three rows to be cleared for both the teams and the judges. So if you are not speaking in the final, make sure that you are not occupying any of the first three rows. And if you are not a judge, do not occupy any of the first three rows.
Hi, I hope I'm audible to everyone in the room. Before I start, this is my first OGF, so I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the PES contingent, and I want to say thank you to Shaunak for teaming up with me. This has been really amazing experience. So, yeah. Hi, my name is Aditi. Preferred pronouns she, her. I will try to take a POI possibly from closing. If I don't, then I'm sorry. Please raise hand. Don't interrupt my speech. Cool. I'm so sorry. Is there a way we can get the book to not slide down? That's fine. I'll just hold it. Okay. It's fine. I'll just hold it. Yeah. It's okay. All right. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. All right. I'm going to start by framing this debate, right? What does politics in India look like? Who are these like political parties, and how voters in India generally look like, and how do they vote? So these political parties are basically dynastic political parties, which means that they have been passed on from generations and generations together. They are like huge families with a lot of influence, a lot of power, a lot of money, and they have been controlling Indian politics for a large amount of time now, right? Second, what do these voters look like? What does voting essentially look like in India, right? People in India mostly vote based on parties and not policies, right? Why is this? People are a little uneducated or unaware of the complexity of policies or the kind of policies that governments tend to run, which means that they'd rather vote for a familiar face than go ahead and read policies that the party proposes or policies that the parties want to pass, which means that now politicians or parties as a whole then go ahead and fuel vote banking channels with things like freebies or things like okay, if you vote for me, I'll give you 2,000 rupees, or if you vote for me, you get free alcohol, right? This means that people are more incentivized to go ahead and vote for freebies or to go ahead and vote for a party person just because they've been given some amount of monetary benefits or some amount of vote banking from this, right? Then this what happens then, right? These political parties have like a significant hold over these politics because no other actors, and the basic framing is that right now in Indian politics, because of these factions, you can't see real tangible change, or you can't see a lot of policies or good policies being passed in government, right? And why is this bad? Why is it bad when we have political factions? Political factions are not political factions based on like two different it's just basically like two families splitting apart because two brothers don't agree on the same thing. And I've already proved to you why like this generational politics or these dynasty politics are mostly families with a lot of influence and power. So what really happens when this gets split, right? What happens when you have two different factions of the same party, right? First thing is that your voter base gets split up, which means that people who funded the same party are now going to be funding two different factions, which means that at any point in time, the funding is reduced for either of these two factions, right? Which means that if I support like the NCP, like if I support like Akhilesh Yadav and like Shivpal Yadav, if I support that party, once they split, if I prefer one policy more, I'm going to be funding that more, right? And same thing goes for other people, which means that the amount that I'm funding into these two parties gets split between the voter bank. And this means that these parties have significantly less funding than if they were not if they did not split. And why is this bad, right? Because most policies or most votes do come from like funding, right? Which means you need to run good electoral campaigns. You actually need to go ahead and go to like the common man. You need to go to the literal ground level, grassroots level in India to get any sort of votes, because the people who are educated already know who they're going to vote for, right? The swing voter base in India is literally these uneducated people or these poor people who don't know who to vote for, and therefore the funding and the electoral campaigning is extremely important. And this is why funding is also very important. So when your funding gets split, you essentially your voter base is also split. You can't really come into power with a clear majority, and even if you do end up coming into power, it's mostly with like a third coalition party, because if you do come into power with the same party, it doesn't make any sense. The debate wouldn't be happening. So what happens then when you have a coalition with like a third party, right? This coalition is still not like a completely fair coalition, right? Even though the votes may be split, the social capital that this dynastic power or this dynastic party holds is a lot more than the one that this other coalition or this other party might hold, right? Why is this true? Because I've told you, India is very, very heavily contingent on dynasty politics. This has been happening ever since independence, which means that people like Rajiv Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi have been controlling a lot of politics in India and have been influencing opinions or passing of policies since the beginning of independence, right? And the reason that And the reason that this is again bad is because you won't be able to make tangible change, right? And even if you do end up forming this coalition government, why will it not work, right? One, when you have this coalition government, there's again, even in the government, it's not a stable coalition, which means that both parties don't enjoy the same amount of power or the same amount of influence from the ground level. Second, any policies that are passed are going to be influenced by the parties that enjoy more social capital. What does this then look like, right? The faction or the people that voted for the third party in this case, right, not like any of the dynasty parties, don't get their votes heard. Even though their party is in power, the chances of them getting their promises heard or getting their policies passed, or even that party being able to fulfill the burdens of its voters, are very less in number, right? The chances of this is happening is very less, which then again brings you to the point of policy, right? The whole point of having a good democracy or any sort of any sort of democracy is to pass policies to help your citizens. If you're not able to pass policies, or if you're not able to come to a consensus on like passing policies, then again the citizens are not going to be happy, and with the rise in these factions, nothing gets passed, right? So this is why we essentially regret the motion, because if you didn't have this, here are the impacts you'd have, right? You'd actually have accountability. And why do we say this? Because when one dynastical party is not split into two, if say they're in power and they fuck up, right, they go ahead and you blame the entire party for it. You don't say, oh, one faction of this party didn't do well, so I'm going to vote for the other faction. You straight up say, this party is bad, therefore I'm going to vote for another option, which means that there's like diversification in ideas in parliament, right? Which means you actually get change, you actually get the other section of society heard, you still have policies somehow being passed, right? Which means that now you have an actual chance of a policy going ahead. And why do I say that you have an actual chance, right? It's because now more people are heard. There are more diverse political opinions than just this one party and this one followers going ahead and influencing the change in this country, right? And this is exactly what happened in like 2014, right? Modi came into power and you had a lot of policies coming out. You had demonetization and you had like Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Whether the like you actually have tangible change, and this is what you look for in a democracy, right? You want to keep your voter base happy, you want to stay in power, and the only way to do this in a democracy is to pass policies where majority of your citizens are happy, right? And you pass policies where your citizens can actually see change. The reason that dynasty politics, even though they enjoy a large social majority, the policies aren't passing is simply because they don't actually go ahead and they work on like false promises, right? This looks like I don't know, promising like freebies to like women in Karnataka, saying we're going to give you free electricity, saying we're going to give you free bus support, but then again going and taxing something that's more, you know, going and taxing things like rice, or going and like lessening the rations in Karnataka. And this is something that's been happening. So even if you do get like freebies on this side, what you do also get is an extra side of taxes that you don't ask for, that still harm the majority of your population. So there's no real delta of change here, because half your population is still going ahead and paying taxes for something that you gave freebies to poor people for. For all these reasons, opening government.
Okay, I just have like small thank yous. So the first thank you is to my girlfriend Beard. She made this T-shirt for me. I'm really thankful for that. Second, to Shaurya, he literally carried me day before yesterday and is carrying me, so that's nice. Thank you. But yeah, with that, sorry, I will start in 3, 2, 1. For any of opening government's case to stand in this debate, they need to prove that everything that they talk about can be fundamentally credited to these internal disputes. What that means is that making freebie promises, making false promises, or making coalitions that become ineffective is something that has been a cornerstone of Indian politics. At a point of time, this has been something that has been existing even before the rise of these internal disputes. They need to prove the delta on their own case. But I mean, I'll leave that burden for your DPM. But with that said, right, how do these disputes look like? Because no, the fundamental thing that these disputes do, because you're right? These are political dynasties that have generated a lot of goodwill across generations, which means my parents probably tell me to vote for Gandhi because they voted for Gandhi their entire time. The fundamental difference that occurs when these internal disputes happen is that the veneer of royalty and nostalgia that these political parties are able to enjoy on your side is removed. This is incredibly important because this veneer is something that leads to impunity for them, but also a certain lack of accountability, which means they can just look back on past achievements, or their political opposition can look back on past failures on them, and they're only judged by those actions. This staying in the past necessarily means that any future policy or present policy actions are undervalued and undercut. This necessarily means that media narratives then become far more about the past rather than the present. Not only about the past benefits that they've created, which is something that they will want to talk about, but also the past failures that have occurred, which is something that the other side wants to talk about. We necessarily want debate and discourse about the present Indian political system, which necessarily only occurs when these internal political disputes are happening. But even if that's not the case, right, there is a smaller but more intense base that both of the split factions are now left with. It is smaller because a lot of people are now just left in the middle, wherein they just thought that I belong to the NCP, I want to vote for the NCP. But when this dispute happens on the highest echelons, I am not privy to the details of why it is happening. It's probably difficult for me to choose a side. This necessarily means that I probably try to opt out of just having loyalty to a particular party. This necessarily means that the primer that is put on policies, that the primer that is put on actions vastly increases when the political disputes and sort of like party loyalty that is likely to exist on side government reduces. But even if all of this isn't true, right, what is likely true is that the splits are largely public, which means you need to back it up with genuine policy, which means when Sharad Pawar and Ajit Pawar split, it's necessary that they not only talk about, hey, you know what, I've split up with this person, I have my own faction, but they want to show a discernible difference between them and us. This necessarily means that a lot of research needs to go into policies. What do people actually want? What electoral mandate can I win upon? And how do I differentiate this from the other person who holds the same amount of credibility and just like general public perception as me? This necessarily means that when I want to differentiate myself from somebody who's seen as extremely similar to me, I focus on policies and actions, something that we want. But even if none of this is true, right, the roots of this dispute then go deep, which means the people who are talking about it are not just media channels or political analysts. Society presidents who are associated with the party talk about it. Grassroots party leaders talk about it. Student leaders talk about it. Which means what happens then is that everybody who is associated with the party now needs to make an actual fundamental choice, which they at least, because of their own reasons and because of their own self-respect, want to at least portray as based on policies. This means policies are pushed to the forefront. But even if none of this is true, right, what is likely is that whenever these disputes happen, they become punitive in nature, which means I want to hurt the other faction. How do I hurt them? I probably criticize the other person's policies. I probably talk about the corruption allegations against them. I probably talk about the scams that they've been embroiled in the past. But necessarily what this also means is that I have a higher ability to do this, which means I have more information than other people about these scams. I roam around in similar circles, which means I have more about access to information, which means I also have more access to any of the skeletons that are hiding in their closet. This necessarily means that once this sort of we do not regret this, because this necessarily means that this becomes a check mechanism for the future. I.e., at a point in time when I know that my party has been embroiled in those sort of scams and corruptions, and they can inevitably come out later on, even if I hide them perfectly, because there is a possibility of a dispute within my own party, which means my own loyal people who I just like did this crime with can simply go against me. It's likely that I do not engage with this in the first place. Sure. Sure. So the thing is, it's not about public accountability, because public accountability comes post facto. Once I've done the thing, once it's out in the public, there are probably people who are criticizing me. Right now, when I'm taking this action, hey, should I just engage in a scam along with a partner of mine or another party leader of mine? It's likely that I do not do it because I know that this party leader might just go up against me some other time, which means overall accountability within the party increases because you cannot trust anybody, which means you do not have anybody to collude with. But why is this particularly important, right? Because note, how do family dynamics work right now? You push people from your own family into power because you believe that blood is what equates to loyalty. At a point in time when these internal disputes are occurring, it's likely that A, you refuse to believe into these notions, which means collusion and monopolization of power goes down, because I simply don't want my younger brother also in the party to have a higher stature, because what if he just follows the other internal disputes and goes up against me? But secondly then, this also makes room for more competence and merit, because I simply don't want to give this position on the basis of family, because the only loyalty primer and incentive I had to do that is loyalty. I do not not have that anymore because that's how the public discourse is telling me things work. But lastly, then grassroots leaders with a proven impact also get more room. But finally, then, even if none of this is true, right? Let's situate this debate in India. The BJP's fundamental narrative has always been about how the opposition is all about dynasty politics. At a point in time when these internal disputes are occurring, it is likely that this weakens all dynasties. But before all of that, right? Why this is a continuing criticism that the BJP can levy against other people is because the dynasties that are part of the highest echelon of these political parties are unwilling to cede power. At a point in time when this leads to the weakening of these political dynasties, it's likely that you can put more pressure onto them to not lead to abdication of a power, but a negotiation wherein there is a certain decentralization that occurs in these sort of dynasties. But secondly, then, when the dynasty system sort of dies down, this also leads to the only credible chance that you have of making a actual opposition to the BJP, which is not only like nice to just have like an actual opposition, but also just like needed for accountability in the entire state. But even if none of this is true, right, I think we're just able to win on criticism and discourse because the way people now interpret politics cannot be about people because they're so confused about who is voting for who. Which means if I am somebody who is loyal to a particular party or to a particular face, now I feel confused, and the differentiating factor needs to come from the politician side. At a point in time when we are able to prove that policy discourse is better on our side, I think we're able to take over any form of gridlock, because this is something that uniquely exists only on side opening opposition, as opposed to gridlock and coalition parties that are fundamentally existing everywhere. Because of all of these reasons, vote opening opposition.
Hi, am I audible? Cool. Just a few words before I start. Nalsar last year was my first comp. I did not break at all. I did not get anything. I was sitting right there seeing next year I'll be on the OGF, and here I am. Just a couple of shout outs. Thank you to my parents and my partner for being so supportive of my debating. Thank you to my teammate for teaming up with me on such short notice. And thank you to the ILS, GLC, and PES DepSocs for being so accommodative of me. Starting in 3, 2, 1. I think if I prove to you that the absence of funding still does not lead to a third party coming into power, and that discourse is largely symmetric but somewhat better on our side, I think OG has no case left. Firstly, if one party splits into two, the failure of one means I trust the other faction more. Why is this true? One, political dynasties have political capital in general, meaning their influence spreads far greater than someone who doesn't come from a political dynasty. Meaning that if the Gandhi family splits into two different factions, and one of the Gandhi factions is in power, and they fail on their policy, I'm not going to say, oh, the Gandhi faction has failed me. I'm going to say, the A faction of the Gandhi family failed me, let's vote for the B faction. This looks like if the Pawar dynasty splits into two, and Ajit Pawar is in power, and Ajit Pawar passes terrible policy, I'm not going to suddenly say that, oh, the NCP in general is bad and their policy is bad. I'm going to say he's not the real representative of the Pawar family, but Sharad Pawar is. And I'm just going to vote for Sharad instead of Ajit. No real change happens. But secondly, I think they get more media attention than someone who does not come from a political dynasty in the first place. Because a lot of these political dynasties attain an almost celebrity-like status in this country. Meaning that even if like Rahul Gandhi says literally anything, people will turn that into like memes for the next meme cycle, which is just true for most political dynasties. Meaning that they in general get more media attention shit. Mean that if Sharad Pawar fucks up, Ajit Pawar is just gonna come and say, that is my brother, he did something bad, vote for me, I'm someone better. But then thirdly, I think this just means that political discourse happens between two aisles of the same political dynasty and not between a third party. This beats a lot of OG's case, because OG's case is just that if a political dynasty comes and they fail and they split into two, I'm somehow going to vote for a third party. I don't necessarily see why that happens. But also, this rise of these internal disputes means that subsequent disputes also become worse. Because if one party faction splits into two and that becomes normalized, the two factions split into four, four turn into eight, and I don't necessarily see why political discourse gets that much better. Meaning, one, the vote bank in general splits into like 8 different factions, meaning political gridlock becomes far worse on their side than on ours. Because if I'm voting for 8 different parties because I'm loyal to that branch of that family as opposed to some other party based on their ideology, and I'm going to vote for that faction regardless of whatever they do, I don't necessarily see why political gridlock gets solved on their side. But secondly, to get the attention of the voters, parties are going to resort to far more great manning and freebies in the first place. Why is this true? I think these dynasties are incredibly powerful and well loved. I think these dynasties have been in power for over 20, 30, 40 years, and some of these have been in power since the independence of this country. And I think in general, this means that I'm going to trust someone from this dynasty more because someone from their family has like run my country or my state or my constituency. This means that to get the attention of the voters, if this faction splits into two, one of the leaders, maybe the elder one, maybe one who is like, I am the right person to call here, I am the one who represents that faction more, is going to get more media attention and is then going to split the vote bank of this party into two, into one of these two factions in the worst, So what does this imply in general, right? I think when their claim is that split parties leads to like discernment based on politics and discourse based on politics, this does not happen for 3 reasons. One, per Aditi's framing, a lot of swing voters are vastly uneducated. They don't know the large scale implications on policy, on their constituency, on their like economic class, on their social background. But secondly, I think this is just empirically untrue. Maharashtra had 3 governments in 3 different days, and none of them would discuss policy. They just said, I am the real NCP. I don't necessarily see why politics discourse happens in the way they talk about. But thirdly, I think they're still ideologically from the same background, meaning that if I am from the Pawar family and I am like raised as a center right or center left politician, and my brother who is also in the same faction is also raised as a center left politician, and we split into 2 factions on the same party, I don't see why his policies are going to be meaningfully different from mine, because we come from the same ideological background, we come from the same familial background, we care for the same economic class and same social interests. This means that what Aditi talks about is that this discourse becomes then more about freebies on as to what you can promise your voters, becomes a much more exacerbated problem on their side. Because I am center right and my brother is center right, but I can say, hey, I'll give you 2,000 rupees when my brother is giving you 1,000. I think voters will vote for me more than my brother. And I think because I get far more media attention than anyone who is not from my political dynasty, I'm far more likely to capitalize on that than some third party that it's unclear how they come into power. And then finally, on their claim of like criticism and discourse, note that criticism and discourse is a non-exclusive claim, because critics of parties are going to exist outside of those parties in the first place. What we differ on is who those critics are. Because insofar as one party splits into 2 factions and both the factions are from the same ideological background, the criticism against the party is going to be coming from the same ideological premise in the first place. Meaning if a liberal party splits into 2 liberal parties and the criticism against that party is liberal in nature, you don't get any meaningful discourse around politics. On our side of the paradigm, had this not been the case, had we not had like split parties for the last 25, 30 years, and you only had one party, one faction ruling this country, the change that happens is that when this party fails me, the people in the country think this dynasty has failed me, I'm going to vote for someone outside of this dynasty, because there don't exist 8 different factions within this dynasty in the first place. But I also think that criticism against this party that are levied are going to be far more against the policies that these parties pass, against, as opposed to like, I am from this familial background. And then, why then is discourse on policy better on our side? Before I move on, POI closing. None from closing, opening. Look, as much as I'm a believer in the one-party state, I don't think that's what this debate is about. I think this debate is far more about like what a party splitting into multiple factions does to politics, and when these factions have like far more economic and social capital. Meaning that if my favorite party splits into 2 factions, and the next year or like 5 years later, I see that those 2 factions have split into 4, meaning how the CPI split into the CPIM, which split into the CPI ML, CPI PWP, and the CPI MG, and the People's War Group. I don't necessarily see why one party I should relate to more than the other, but it's further exacerbated when this happens because of political dynasties, meaning that if a political dynasty is split and I'm loyal to one, I'm just going to think that I don't want to vote for anyone anymore because the party that I wanted to vote for has split into two. The dynasty that I cared for split into two factions. One of them says they represent them, but none of them cater to my interests. Both of the political discourse that comes on my side of the political paradigm is just same in ideological nature. They promise me freebies one year, they promise me freebies the next year. I don't see why politics gets better. And the ordinary intelligent voter, or in this case, the ordinary voter of a country, does not understand which party to vote for. They become politically apathetic. They lack political participation in future elections. And this is necessarily true because note that political participation in Maharashtra elections has been the lowest it has in like the last 10 years. And this keeps on happening because the party you want to vote for splits into multiple factions. And I think we win over CG on that regard because political participation comes logically prior to any benefit that they try to unlock. Proud to win from OG.
Hi, am I audible? Yeah? Yeah, I have some thank yous too. First, thank you very much to Naman for coming to this tournament with me. Yeah, the whole plan was that we would enjoy our trip, and that's definitely happened. Second of all, I just want to thank PES Debate Society, one of the best debate societies in India. They got to finals. Also want to thank Jindal Debate Society. They're very fun and very smart people. Just got a bit unlucky this tournament. And of course, I want to thank all of my loved ones, my parents, my partner, and of course, my other partner. No one needs to know what that means. Okay. But yes, thank you for the support. For most of Indian history, no party has had a singular majority. They've worked in coalitions. The reason for this is because the diversity and complexity of this country means that we have a massive amount of regional parties that have incredible local control over resources, the media, and social capital. What this looks like is places like Maharashtra, where the Shiv Sena has almost an entire monopoly for decades on the actual control of how the media operates and what people believe. The reason for this is obvious. The reason, of course, being that people are complicated and have different cultures, so they end up forming some kind of local party that represents their views and hence gives them an alternative to the large national parties that were there in the beginning of the country's existence, such as the Congress and currently, of course, the BJP. This is not going to go away. If CG has a case about how the BJP will use this to become powerful, I'll deal with it in a second. But the vast majority of history shows us that regional ties are quite strong, which means that people want to vote for people who relate to them, speak their language, and have a history of passing policy within their own state. The problem is that because of the way independence works, a lot of these parties consolidated power through dynasties, which are now breaking apart. The first thing I want to tell you is what this does to political competition, because I think we need to understand what this means in order to weigh this against the best case of opening government. First, three extraneous responses. First, they claim you are still dynastic on our side once the dynasty breaks apart because you just vote for the guy who looks more like he's the correct Pawar. Presumably, people are literate, and hence, or even if they're not illiterate, they can at least hear what the person's saying. And if they hear Sharad Pawar say, I am the real Pawar, and Ajit Pawar say, no, I am the real Pawar, they have to ask themselves, how do I decide who is the real Pawar? Which is our whole case. To decide that, you need a separate metric. If that metric is accusations of corruption, we're fine with that, because it is no longer that you vote for them because of their last name and because of their dynasty. That is what opens up political discourse. The second thing I want to say extraneously is that you apparently compete on freebies only on side opposition. opposition. I guess OG hasn't been living in the same country. Every car party will obviously compete on freebies and as a result want to give money out to voters. That doesn't change in the debate. More competition means, however, that they cannot consolidate all that funding into just throwing money at voters. Often they have to compete on other platforms such as actually persuading them. Here's a freebie for you: good governance that leads to you getting money at the end of your workday because you haven't been paid a salary. So these options become more legitimate when your lobbying starts to split apart and you can't just win with a deluge of money and ads. But third of all, criticism from within is bad. No, criticism from within is exactly what you need. Did you hear Naman's speech? If you trust only one family, then when the family breaks apart, you trust one person, you also trust three other people who you've idolized your whole life. You've heard stories about how these are smart individuals who care about your state. You've seen them idolized as people who are doing things for the betterment of your life. When they disagree, the question you ask yourself is, how do I trust one of them over the other? Which creates the explosion of debate and discourse where your family and friends don't know who to support immediately, so they have to discuss what exactly are they disagreeing on and how does it affect us. That is how political discourse develops across the world. Big parties split apart and people realize that there are differences in policies, then you think through. So first impact then, thinking through ideology on-side government is when you push for dynasties. On our side, you push for policies. Even if you don't push for policies, let's tell you why this wins. First, at least the mudslinging from people who have insider information on corruption scandals, people who recognize why the infrastructure isn't being built, people who know why a policy isn't being passed, people who know the dirty secrets of a politician is good for everyday governance because you are on high alert when your best friend who knows all of your secrets is calling you out in public. As a result, when you pass a policy, you make sure it's implemented. When you make a promise, you make sure people get that money. This wins already because note, this often lasts 10 to 20 to 30 years where people continue feuding, at which point everyday policy gets better. On-site government, at best, they still pass policy. But what kind of policy do they pass when they're dynastic and highly simplistic? They can first pass actively harmful policy because without accountability, you could have immense corruption, incredible inefficiency, and a loss of money. Guess what that leads to? Debt, struggling, active harms. On our side, when every policy that's passed is actually properly vetted, everyone's life gets better. All policies are more efficient, all people live a better life, and the bipartisan benefit that occurs for everyone outweighs them even if they've won this clash, which they do not. But second, the reason you should mitigate the claims about gridlock in this debate is because the average function of the Indian government is not based on Sharad Pawar, it's based on the IASs and the actual civil service. Most things that happen from the government are done by civil servants who don't disappear in a poof of smoke on side opposition. Second of all, we win because we have so much more political activity internally, and this is already enough to wipe out back half. Note when you no longer have nepotistic dynasties and you run on the platform of not Pawar because the other guy is Pawar, you have to run on big ideological differences. Gov says they are similar because they come from the same background. Yes, bestie, that was the status quo you are defending. On our side, when they split apart, they have to find differences in order to make themselves look distinguished. So they often move further apart in order to look different. At that point, people within that party can no longer just win because they're related to the family, but because they're good politicians, good communicators, good policymakers. The BJP has meritocracy within its party because it doesn't have a family to support it. It needs to have people who are persuasive publicly. In the same way, these parties start to look for more talented people because they know they no longer need just nepotistic connections to the family. This massively increases the amount of people who now run for office and are willing to compete within the party, which also makes the choices for people so much better. Closing. First, a lot of times these parties come into power with a smaller majority, which means that they have more people opposing them and giving information about their failures, which makes it a more efficient government. Second, sometimes these parties come into power with coalitions in third parties, which looks like working with the BJP, which is happening, I think, in Maharashtra. At that point, what happens is, first, when they work with third parties, the competition between these two parties creates a real choice for voters because they can actually pick between them. And the third party is often a moderating force that creates some level of stability within that coalition. So if the BJP works with one split faction or the INC works with one split faction, the local coalition government that's formed cannot be so extreme that they are just cracking down on their enemies and passing like radical policies because they still need national legitimacy. But they often have control over national resources because they work with large parties that are willing to support them in order to keep gaining resources. So there are two possible conclusions in this debate that occur from opening opposition. First, the most likely one that all of you have seen, which is a lot of times one of the factions wins, in which case they are simply governing more efficiently with more accountability. In the other case, they work with the third party, which cannot simply run the entire state because they need their support. So they check and balance each other to be efficient. Finally, the worst case in this debate is that somehow this split causes so little support for these parties that a third party comes in and runs the whole country and makes it into an authoritarian state. Something like that. The problem is, no matter how the dynamics go on back half, no matter how they frame it, the choice of the voter is better when you break their echo chamber into discussing what happens around them, when you show them that their beliefs are not simple enough to be based on a last name, but to be based on policy. That discourse alone should win the debate for opening opposition.
If I shout like this, is this good enough instead of using the mic? Hello. Is better? Yeah, just quickly want to thank three people. One, Mahor, for bringing me to this comp. We've been debating for the last 4.5 years. I think it's the most fun activity I've done in college. My girlfriend for letting me go this weekend when she also had a holiday instead of spending time with her, and the IIT Bombay DebSoc. You guys have been amazing. It's a fun time to debate with you. So yeah. Cool. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I don't know what kind of India opening half has been living in. They did not talk about the largest political party, which literally is an existential threat to all of these dynastic political parties, the BJP, right? We think that the reason why we're having this debate in the first place is in the last 15 years, these parties have not been able to come into power, right? They fought elections, they lost them, which is why there is internal strife in terms of, hey, what is the strategy we need to employ for our future elections? What are the kind of policies that we need to think about in the first place? Our extension is very simple, right? We think that all of these benefits that opening half talks only happens if you have the ability to retain some sort of power. Our case is that at the point at which there is internal disputes, these parties can never get onto power or be a reliable opposition in the absolute worst case. And why do we need a reliable opposition is what we're going to prove from our side of the house. Before that, we do think that these parties have some sort of a check mechanism, right? One, we think that election itself is a fantastic check mechanism. The point at which when BJP comes and criticizes you about the kind of things that you're doing, at least there is public discourse about things like corruption, public discourse about things like scams. Sure, if your brother comes and tells you that this guy is fucked up, maybe more people will believe that. We still don't know how that's going to change in terms of your ability to win that election, right? Second, we also think that the kind of voters that largely vote in India right now are younger people, right? They're not as tied to these dynastic politics as much as their parents are. They probably are influenced by their family telling them where to vote, but they also have the ability to make a choice for themselves, which means we think that there is a push from those kind of voters also to cater to their specific needs, and therefore there is enough grassroots criticism that keeps these parties on check. All that being said, now, why do we think an unchecked government is bad, especially BJP without opposition is significantly worse, right? Before that, what do we mean by opposition in the first place? One, we think that these parties need to push against things like electoral scams, right? The point at which the election happened in Uttar Pradesh and like Muslim constituencies, people were literally not allowed to come to the voting booth and cast their vote. It's hard for these things to get out of into the public space. It's hard for a journalist to go and cover this. Only when a large opposition political party can point this out and can fight against this and make sure that there's legislation to protect this, we think that democracy itself is protected in this country. But secondly, things like big ticket infrastructure, right? Which kind of states do you choose to allocate stuff on? Where in the state do you allocate like resources to build like large roads, large like SEZs and stuff like that? We think that these are super important for people to have some sort of like say over, and this is the kind of opposition that is at least going to exist, right? Which means even on policies, we think we're slightly better, but Mohar is going to tell you why policies are not important. But first, like three burdens in this extension. One, why do we think that we're the only strong opposition that exists to BJP in the first place? Three reasons here. One, national parties are weak today, right? Like the Congress literally does not have a strong leader, which means that it's very difficult for them to go out there and be like, hey, we're going to be a strong opposition, vote for us. Most people feel like even if they vote for the Congress, their vote is actually not going to count. We've seen this happen in the past where they're forced to come up with coalitions and alliances that are weak inherently, right? Second, we think that like media and demonstrations are getting harder for people to do in the first place, right? Because the BJP is already curtailing the freedom of the media in terms of them being able to oppose them like effectively. It's harder for you to do things like demonstrations in majority control areas, which means we need these opposition parties to come and keep the BJP in check. But third, we think that a state opposition is particularly more important because state policies are the ones that are more directly impactful for these people in the first place, right? Where like budgets on a local level are allocated. Things like quotas, things like employment schemes are like ideated. We think, which is why we think that like an opposition in the state like legislature is super important. Second, why do we think that internal dispute makes them significantly weaker, and why is that horrible, right? Four reasons here. One, look at literally what, like when this happens in the context of Indian elections, right? Just before, like in Maharashtra, it's literally one like splinter of the party that went and formed the government with BJP, right? We think that people are likely to jump ship to BJP at the point at which they feel that they're not like winning that election, or unlikely to win that election, meaning that the power of, like, say, the BJP is consolidated in large amounts by these places, right? Why do we think they have an incentive to actually do this? Because you have some sort of like some chance of being in power for the next 5 years, which you don't see if you stick with your own party, right? Which is why we think that this splintering happens just before the election, because you want that power for those next 5 years. You want to make the money that you potentially can as a large politician, so that you can go and fight the election next year and potentially win as an independent party. Which means, first, we think that internal disputes means that the worst impact is that they jump ship and they enable the BJP to form governments in a lot of these places. But second, we think that at the point at which your own brothers and like the leaders of these dynastic political parties criticize their own people, it becomes super hard for them to win any kind of vote, right? Because the biggest advantage that these kind of parties have had is literally the legitimacy of their family. At the point at which you yourself are throwing ink on it, we think that it becomes harder for people to trust you. But third, we think that funding also becomes lesser, right? And like OG tried running this, but they just said that funding gets split. We don't think funding gets split. We just think that the pool itself reduces for a lot of these opposition parties, because you don't want to fund parties that have an internal dispute, right? You don't know if they are stable enough to even actually contest that election and win it properly. You don't know how their policy stances are going to look like. Yeah, before I move on, Shorgo. Couple of responses to that. No, both factions together are still not strong enough, which is why they're not able to win a lot of state elections in the status quo itself. I don't know why on your side of the house things will change significantly and the BJP, like, they'll be able to win. But second, like the BJP itself is currently extremely strong, right? They're able to get into things like one, they're able to like, I think the message of telling that, hey, this is a completely defunct party because they're fighting amongst themselves, is going to dissuade voters from going there, rather than telling that, oh, their dad and son are the ones who are potentially working there. Which is why I think that the criticism against these opposition parties becomes easier for BJP on your side of the house, which means they're less likely to win, right? Why do we think this kind of opposition is important? What do we think are the impacts of this, right? One, we think that people lose hope in political discourse at the point at which they don't see a strong opposition, right? You just don't have a lot of Indian youth that come and participate in politics if they feel like their vote is completely useless. We think that this is absolutely horrible, because literally these are the people who are going to be a large voter base in the future. We want them to come out in large numbers and potentially vote in a strong opposition into power. Without that, we think that democracies itself fail. But second, we think that it's possible to shift to policy discourse only on our side of the house, right? Because you're not mudslinging these people at the end of the day. There is discussion between action versus inaction on our side of the house. On their side of the house, it is still a lot of mudslinging, which means we have some sort of shift to policy discussion. More will speak more about this. But thirdly, we think that in general, competition between leaders is good for democracy, right? If you don't have an opposition in the next 10 years, it is impossible for us to have parties that are competing with each other and getting the best policies out to people. They kill the opposition. We think it's horrible for an opposition to die in a democracy like India. For those reasons, vote CG.
I need my phone. Timer work there? Okay. Okay. Does this work? Okay. Is this okay actually? My voice? Oh. Okay, fine. I'll just speak from this. Give me a second. Yeah, okay. Is this okay? All right. It's distracting. Our name Archit. I'll take POIs around 5, probably from opening, but I'll let you know. Just give me a second. Okay, cool. Just before I start, I want to say something. This is my 4th Nalsar. So if I come back next year, I'll get a degree. I just came to the finals to say this. Yeah, sure, we can go now. Okay, fine, we'll debate. I'll begin in 3, 2, 1, go. This country is a beautiful mosaic of ideologies, regional identities, struggles, histories, and cultures. We think that this is crushed under the boot of the power of a party that has ruled with impunity for the last 10 years, destroying civic institutions, destroying cultural barriers, destroying homes of people. Essentially, we think whatever happens in this debate, the ability to stop this party from doing that is going to be most important. The first thing I want to clarify is the characterization extension about what these disputes actually look like and how they legitimately lead to things like splitting. This is the prerequisite to a lot of the impacts of opening opposition case. Insofar they don't prove why the splitting happens or why this is extremely intense in its nature and magnitude, you can't buy the fact that this dynasty is extremely weak and therefore people have the ability to opt out and go for different political ideologies or cross the line of the political line and things like that, or have anything else about like cross-pollination ideas that they want. First, notice that these kind of the kind of conflicts are likely to be things that are going to be extremely big, to be weaponized by the individual members of the party. That is, if I'm going to go against my elder brother, that means I need to find something inside the party that at least half of my politicians extremely are aligned with, to go against the existing structure and to splinter against them and come for me, which means by nature it has to be extremely large in magnitude. We think the only thing that can be as large in magnitude and ideological strength are things about whether you should align yourself more to the center or more towards regional importances. Things like, do you support things like Hindi? Do you support things like state interventions? Do you support things like a bigger BJP government? Or do you support things like the local language? Do you support things like local religions? Do you support things like the importance of local state governments and their economic freedom and things like that? And we think that's the only strong, important kind of conflict that can be used or weaponized by these splinter groups or the leaders of splinter groups who want to make these kind of things. Ultimately, then, we think people care enough about these things to actually follow through with it, ultimately then. But notice why it's also a slippery slope, which means at one point when a conflict happens, it leads to a loss of trust, which means there's increased speculation about a future likelihood of you doing under the table deals, of you doing like backstabbing, of you doing blackmailing, things like that, which means at a point a single conflict happens, more conflicts are likely to happen after that, which is a slippery slope of things becoming more unstable in the relationship between dynamic family members. But also notice it's damaging to the point of splitting itself, because of media pride. That is, it is shown in the media that you have a disagreement with your elder brother, and at a point where nothing comes out of it, you come out as weak, you come out as somebody who's smaller, as somebody with no political freedom or willpower or strength, and you can't do anything in your future. That's extremely bad for your incentives and extremely bad for your ability to like sort of like do anything of your own in the future, which is why you're likely to continue conflicts until the end and ensure they happen to a level that it comes to splitting. But also it looks like how your own political legitimacy is at fault at a point where your own party members who have at a point come to split out in public for you or say, I support your side of the version of the policy, and then you fail them and the conflict leads to no resolution at all in terms of these kind of like compromises and whatnot, ultimately then leads to things like them having less faith in you, and your ability to do future kind of conflicts itself reduces, which is why you want to maximize conflicts right now. But finally, it looks like how internal pressure exists by ambitious politicians who come to support you, because at a point where more splinters happen, more leadership positions open up amongst these splinter parties. This is important because more ambitious politicians want to fill up these positions. This is important, this debate, because when there's more pressure by ambitious politicians to want to open up and have more positions, there's a bottom-up pressure of creating splits, which forces these kind of splits to actually happen. Ultimately, then, that's why we have a lot of these splits happening, but importantly characterized that these kind of splits happen with these segments of regional supporting parties going away from center supporting parties, which means, for example, if there's the elder brother and the younger brother, the elder brother wants to retain power, they stick with the BJP systems, but the younger brother splits away with the regional sort of policy alliances that sort of his own politicians have splintered with him for. This is important. Why? Because now what happens is that most of these split ups will consolidate into the Indie Alliance bloc. Why is this true? Because one, the Indie Alliance bloc is also running on regional importance philosophies, things like how local culture is important, things about how minority religions are important, things about how local sort of power of like local state governments are important, and things like that, which means they already align with you. But also the Indie Alliance is likely to accept more of your demands at a point where they are currently losing elections. They want more people under their umbrella to increase their own strength, which is why they're more likely to make alliances with you and make compromises with you to get you happy, to get you into the alliance. But also the Indie Alliance necessarily improves the legitimacy as a person who's broken off from the main family family line, because you have to show to your cadre and show to the public that you can be a good politician, that you can make connection, that you can have strong looking friends who have huge stages and like huge amounts of money with them, huge business backing, which is why we have an incentive to look legitimate by being accepted into the India Alliance, which has, and we don't think there's any other more large source of legitimacy in this debate than this kind of connectivity that you can show to your audience, both public and inside your own splinter political party. But also, listen, the India Alliance can contribute things like funding and volunteering efforts, which just simply do not have the capacity for as a small individual party. But notice how you going out alone just does not work. Things like you don't have your own resources to be able to do intense ad campaigns or do intense kind of maneuvering or sort of like mobilization on the streets, because you don't have as much money because of the size of a splinter. It looks like how you're appearing alone and weak is extremely bad for your legitimacy, which means your ability to sort of command troops or to sort of make them listen to you itself extremely reduces, which is why again you want to avoid being alone. But also looks like how you have the ability to sort of, you don't have the ability to make coalitions by yourself without the India Alliance, at the point where the India Alliance has the Congress party, which is extremely strong, who we don't think is splintering in this debate, because the Congress Alliance and all the Gandhi family members have the same ideologies and the whole party itself is kind of united. Ultimately then means that we think that you need the Congress to be able to make alliances in the first place. Without it, you don't have the connects, you don't have the resources, you don't have the legitimacy to actually make more regional alliances and things like that, which are of unique in strength. Ultimately then, actually, I'll take POI quickly from opening. The important change is the Congress was little bit smaller before, it's become a little bit bigger now with every single splinter happening. It doesn't matter if the BJP gets even bigger because it's already so powerful. At the point where the India Alliance and the opposition becomes stronger, that's a meaningful change because of things I'm going to discuss right now. Why is it important that they are able to do this to keep the BJP accountable? One, because the size of the India Alliance will increase. This means things like more volunteers for things like more door-to-door campaigning and more resources to make them work. Think about this. Regional parties have knowledge of local cultures, local customs, what people care about. I have the capacity to understand them, to relate with them, to convince them very well. What I don't have is resources, time, energy, volunteers, efforts, backing, systemic strength, things like that. I uniquely can get this provided by the India Alliance itself with a strong Congress party, which still has a lot of business connections, things like that, which is why I'm able to weaponize the strength of my regional sort of like, what's it called, acceptability by local people, which is a unique way to strengthen the India Alliance, which is how you win general elections, by taking more of the regional votes away from the BJP. It looks like more Indian kind of branding, because the main weapon of the BJP is you're less Hindu, you're less Indian, at a point where you can opt into things like narratives of national unity, of togetherness, of more is, you have like unity is more, of like differences as sort of a source of our strength. At a point where you can show different tribal leaders and different sort of splits are coming together, that invokes these kind of feelings, which is why they're able to again see more legitimate and sort of have this branding to do better campaigning. But ultimately the capacity for the alliance to work is simply because they have a mutual incentive to beat the BJP, and necessarily most ideologies don't clash, they're all pro region. So any improvement of a region in a policy is good for all these kind of members, which is why they're all happy. For those reasons, vote for side closing opposition.
Can you all see me above the podium? I think I can. Okay. Okay. I'm going to make just a quick few shout outs as well. So first thing, shout out to Nalsar for not organizing their comp during IIT Bombay mid-semester exams. I mean, literally our contingent always misses this comp because we always have mid-semester exams at this time. And I'm really happy that this time there are a lot of kids of mine that are here. Every single time it's just me, Harshit, and maybe a couple of others that are brave enough to bunk exams. So, yes, and of course, shout out to Harshit. Like, I mean, this comp has been really fun, and I just love debating with the person I've been debating with for like 4.5 years. Anyway, so I'll be beginning my speech in. Okay, you'll start it. I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. The problem with both op benches is very much the same. OO,
takes this line where they say that there are better politicians that come in because of this discourse and stuff like that. And CEO, after 3 minutes of explaining to me why this splintering happens, comes and says the same thing, that hey, more ambitious politicians do come in. They are the ones that make these reforms. They are the ones that change the party from within, and these dynastic parties have been bad. The simple way I'm going to do in the start of this speech is that it's way more important to prioritize these parties having a chance rather than the quality of these parties. We are willing to make a trade-off on the quality of these parties, absolutely, and we are willing to concede all the worst cases of side opposition and saying that the dynastic parties are ideological, corrupt, driven, blah blah blah. The simple way for this is that you need somebody who has an unchecked, you need somebody that has some amount of check mechanism over the BJP, which all sides seem to agree on. And how am I going to go ahead and compare this? First thing, we think that in terms of you going ahead and having some chance, CEO's mechanism is saying that you'll go to the India alliance because now they'll accept you because you have more legitimacy and things like that or whatever. But the problem is that with one of the parties going to the India alliance, the other one is going to the National Democratic Alliance that BJP has, which means that this is literal splintering of the party into two, where one half of the party joins the BJP in alliance. You look at all the parties that do this, this is literally what happens, because one, you cannot be in the same alliance if you split as parties, but two, you cannot stand independently in India in elections anymore because the BJP is way too powerful for you to do this in the first place. Shaurya's analysis relied on the fact that you somehow win elections. I think just forgot that BJP exists. I don't blame them. I mean, they are terrible. Sometimes you want to forget that they exist. So the second problem with closing opposition is that they don't analyze what happens after you go ahead and enter this India alliance. Even in their best case, let's say that they enter this India alliance better, blah blah blah, they don't prove to me, one, why you can win back state elections. Because note that for most impacts in this debate, people are talking about individuals that are disenfranchised by BJP's policies, which are more operational at a regional racism level, where they go ahead and isolate certain groups, where they go ahead and take land away from certain groups to build religious monuments, and like where they go ahead and do electoral fraud in certain constituencies. When there are regional level things that the BJP is harming you for, it's irrelevant to argue that, oh, in national election, we'll go ahead and have a better coalition. We think that on that metric, we are the only side that actually addresses how you realistically win these state elections in the first place. But then let's come to opening opposition, and I'm going to categorically highlight every burden that's missing within their speech. For their case to work, there are four things that need to be proven. One is that these criticisms are meaningful in the first place. Secondly is that post-criticism, the discourse is positive. The third is that they will be voted in somehow. And the fourth is that they will pass good policy. I'm going to prove to you why they didn't do all four of these things and they're fourth in this debate. So firstly, on these criticisms being meaningful, I think that the only analysis that they give is just saying buzzwords like these will be scams, these will be big things because your brother is exposing them, so they sound legitimate and things like that. But the problem is the contextualization we give you is the more accurate one, given this house regrets motion, and this is something that already happened. People pre-coalition go party hopping because they're tired of not being in power and think that they can win this election with more likelihood if they jump to the other party. Secondly, it's based on family feuds where you go ahead and have disagreements on how the economic divide should be, because you had like one father, or like in most cases father, because it's India, you had one father who went ahead and ran the political party, and then you have two sons of theirs that are disputed over who should get what part and things like that. But thirdly is that the public narrative is never around policy, because note that the context of this debate is that these parties have been declining and in most instances losing power to the BJP, which means there is no real policy discourse, because there is no real policy that they passed. They're going to go ahead and do things like promises. They're going to go ahead and do things such as like mudslinging the other individual, and that's just not helpful in any possible way. But the last thing is that this gives BJP a unique way to weaponize this against these individuals themselves, in saying that they're so splintered, no one cares about their accountability. No one cares about who proved that they're the better power. The win is of BJP at the end of the day, and that's what both op benches literally don't want. The second burden that they miss, post-criticism, there will be discourse, and this discourse will be meaningful. Problem with this is that we analyzed to you and characterized to you that the actual voter base that matters in this debate will lose hope when there exists this rupturing. Because note that for you to go ahead and have this hope and continue to do this discourse, you need to be politically motivated enough to go ahead and turn up and to keep discussing these things, to keep discussing these random allegations of mudslinging that keep coming on your Instagram page and things like that. At some point, if these things are not meaningful, they are not something that's affecting actual change, or that's actually going into how powerful the BJP is, or how you can oppose them. We just think that this leads to opt out later. So that's the second burden that's missing, and I think that they don't prove that there's positive discourse in any way. They just say discourse, and Shaurya just says, look at all examples in the world, this is how it works. Problem is they forgot BJP. Third thing is they would be voted in. I literally don't have any analysis for this. Shaurya is just like, best case they're voted in with a small majority. How the fuck? But anyway, the fourth burden that's missing is that their policies will actually be good, because even if we agree all of this is true, there is no guarantee that the policies are actually good, because they're not formed on a discourse of effective, formed on effective discourse like they wanted to prove. Yeah. I think about that every day, and it is quite difficult, but we give you the best chance. Anyway, so why do we think that despite all of this, why do we think that despite all of this, even if you believe that all of this is like not true, even in what we said, and these burdens were not missing, we still independently impact significantly better than other teams? What are the end goals we reach on our side of the paradigm? Firstly, is that we're able to ensure a check mechanism means that the democratic protections are better. It means that the media that BJP has bought out has some competition, because there's someone who has enough money to buy back some media houses. There's someone who has enough money to fund independent journalists to go ahead and report malfeasances that are happening. But secondly, is the representation for regional interest significantly increases, because note that these dynastic parties collectivize regional interest in going ahead and showing that the BJP is doing this that is categorically harmful for the region, and we are the only ones that show you that. But thirdly, giving oligarchical privileges to families such as Adani's and Ambani's and stuff like that also comes under a check mechanism. I'm not saying that's necessarily always bad, but in an unchecked way, that's horrible. Our case isn't that BJP is a shit show. Our case is an unchecked BJP is an absolute shit show, and we are the ones that give you the way to check it. So proud to propose.
While I'm setting this up, a lot of thank yous, because I haven't had the chance to speak at as many finals as maybe the rest of the room has. Nalsar 22 was my first offline tournament. It was my first tournament with Archit. It was my first BP. And I missed break by a point, and it absolutely crushed me. I was crying outside Sarklaw. I was crying outside the gate. So it means a lot that I'm here. It means a lot that the contingent is here. The second thing is, Nalsar 22 was also the last time Manasija, a speaker from VIT, won. So there's a lot of legacy here that I want to live up to. And regardless of what happens in this round, I hope to make the people in the VIT contingent proud, my teammate proud, who I'm extremely thankful for. And lastly, just a shout out to my parents, my partner, my other partner. I think there's a common theme on op bench here, but yeah. Starting in starting in 3, 2, 1. The reason why these disputes happen never go away, and no team tells you if anything about that happens. This debate then is about on Gov. Do you let these parties die a slow and painful death? Or do you let these parties slice themselves in half and rise anew and invigorated, ready to fight against the oppressive boot of the NDA? The first thing I want to do is point out that no team on Gov actually has a counterfactual for the reasons that I explained. That is to say, if these disputes don't happen, then what's happening? This is why Archit's extension on why these disputes happen and how they materialize are crucial for this debate. Because what this does is prove that there's going to be disagreements on policy. And this gets strengthened on the Gov analysis itself, on how you want to differentiate yourself, how you have different ideas, how you're thinking about multiple things, and how there's like different family dynamics, etc. What this means is there's a large amount of internal discord that never gets an outlet. We think this has probably two manifestations in this debate. One, the party that doesn't get its way within this, which is probably the younger brother, the son, the nephew, etc., feel extremely demotivated because there's no stake in the game for them. They don't get to decide the policies. They don't get to do anything about it. They don't get any mobilization. They don't get any credit. What does this mean? We think then effectively half of the party becomes dead and sluggish because there's no incentive for them to participate in the first place, given that they're constantly shut out. We think it's extremely likely that they're going to be shut out also because these are political strong dynasties where things like family dynamics, things like legacy, things like a chip on the shoulder that you're only in politics because of my favor mean that it's extremely hard to actually speak out in any sense if you're not willing to go ahead and have that dispute in the first place. What does this prove independently of everything in the debate? That opposition parties on their side are crippled and ineffective and can't do anything. This engages in their best case because now, how do you actually win your elections is the question they have to answer. The second thing I want to do is how does the BJP actually go ahead and bring political parties or like smaller political parties into the loop of the coalitions. The basic context here is the National Democratic Alliance is what the BJP leads, the India Bloc is what the Congress leads, etc. The simple thing is because of the same type of oligarchical support that the BJP has, support from the largest industrialists like the Ambani, the Adani, and large amounts of political control over like the population, means that their easiest tactics is to literally throw money and throw promises of power to these smaller parties in the first place. And this is likely to be very effective because the reason why a lot of these smaller parties join in the first place is because they feel like they want to protect their regional identities, but they don't have the power, access, and capacity to go ahead and implement them, which is why these options seem so lucrative in the first place. But we combine this with the context that I told you in my POI, that the BJP has literally gone with zero regard for democratic institutions. It has stacked the election commission. It has stacked every institution with its own people. That means it's extremely unlikely as to why the opposition parties organically win in the first place. You combine this with the fact that they have a large capacity to go ahead and go ahead and consume these smaller political parties, means it's on their side that the NDA coalition actually keeps on growing. But the second reason is as to why this lobbying from the NDA is effective is because now they literally just have to deal with one political head because their word is law for these political parties. This is something analysis that all teams agree in terms of how political dynasties work, which is to say the amount of negotiation that they have to do is for one single person, one ideology. The amount of money that they have to throw is far less. The amount of promises that they have to give is far less. We think it makes it easy for BJP to do this on a far wider scale, which is why these parties actually end up joining the NDA in the first place. What does all of this mean? This explains the context of why proving splintering happens is the most important thing in the debate. The second thing I'm going to do to you is to explain Archit's extension as to why proving the splintering and why the splintering results in good political parties is crucial and why this actually ends up winning the debate. First, I want to complete the comparative on which side do political parties join, because the question is fair. If parties what is actually the delta in this debate? The delta here is, in most instances, these large political dynasties are already aligned with the NDA. This looks like the Shiv Sena already being part of the NDA in Maharashtra, and then later splitting up, and then some part of them going ahead and aligning with the India party in the first place. On basic math, this means that power that already exists, support that existed with the BJP, undergoes attrition and joins the India bloc, which means the India bloc increases in size, which is what Archit said in the first place. But the second reason is why the BJP's capacity to lobby multiple party reduces, is because now they have to go ahead and negotiate with 2 party heads, 3 party heads, X number of splinter party heads, which means they have to spend a lot more money, and it's extremely uncertain if they actually end up getting returns on this money in the first place. Thereby coming under question from these from their donors as to is this effective spending or not. not. The reason why this is ineffective spending for some splinters is the reasons why Archit tells you these splits happen, because on these are extremely personal and identity based lines that you ought not to align yourself with the center no matter what, even if it means that you can probably enact your policies, which means some parties are just not willing to concede in the first place, which means BJP has to negotiate far more. This reduces their capacity to grow the NDA. What does this do? This settles and proves that at closing opposition, the India bloc is the one that grows. Before I move on, opening. Got it. Cool. I'm going to explain that integrated into the second part, right? But chill. What actually happens when you splinter? Archit tells you this gives a far wider platform and avenues for invigorated and young political leaders that were otherwise shunned from these parties due to the dynastic approaches. OO says that yes, you don't give them people platforms. They don't tell what happens as a result of this. Now that these leaders have positions of responsibility, now that they have face time, now that they have avenues to launchpad their own political careers, it means they have far more stake in the game. They have far more skin in the game. We just say on the gov best case that you aren't able to do anything and you can't win, this still means that you're able to go ahead and mobilize because you're far more motivated. You're able to organize rallies far more. You're able to protest far more. You're able to get the message that the people of your region are probably not doing as well and will do far worse under the boot of the NDA. We think this means that even if you don't win currently, in the future your chance improves because this sorts of political messaging compounds over time, and we prove the unique incentive as to why politicians actually have the capacity and interest to engage in this in the first place. I think this debate is quite clear. No team actually proves how this changes politics. We're the one that actually tells you how this happens. We're the one that reduces the size of the NDA, which means far less oppressive policies go through with ease. We actually improve lives on the grounds for those reasons. Closing opposition.
Hello, check. Hello, hello.
Yeah, closing ceremony is starting now. So if there's anyone left, please call them immediately.
Hello, hello. We are starting with the closing ceremony. We will begin with a word of thanks by Ashik and Rakshita, the tournament directors of this event.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, firstly, for coming to Nalsar Ivy. This is the 15th edition, and first of all, we're so proud to host all of you here. So, a big round of applause for everyone who has shown up here, and thank you so much. Uh, Firstly, I think it's probably just like a big note of thanks to Rakshita Hebar, my co-TD, who has been here day in and day in and day out. It could not have been possible without her. And Ansh, the treasurer of the tournament, who has been here again for sorting out everything, even apart from your finances. And a large thanks to the Vice Chancellor and the entire administration for supporting us throughout the tournament for everything and every request that we asked for. Thank you so much, sir. And to the amazing cap that we have from Bia to Banoon, Vansh, Shaurya, and Keshav. Thanks so much, guys. Without you, this tournament would not have been possible at all. Like, they were there on calls even at midnight when, like, they practically worked as organizing committee members along with us. And a special thanks to Vansh for that as well. And most importantly, to every member of the organizing committee, a huge thanks to all of you. We could not have done this without you guys. Like, literally not sleeping throughout the last 3 days is just insane amount of work. And to get you all here, 120 teams, Shreya and Kamal, a huge thanks to the both of you for managing Reg. And to every single person who worked day in and day out with respect to the tournament. And a huge thanks to Pranav Kagalkar. I hope you're watching this, for everything. And I also thank my previous tournament directors, especially Anushka and Arav, and for the amount of disturbances that we have caused. And I think there's so much more to thank, but we can't conclude. I'll just give over the mic to Rakshita.
I think Ashik has said most of which needs to be said, but it is important to note that this tournament would have been a logistical nightmare if not for every single one of the attendants who helped us out. Again, this includes tech support, this includes our amazing tab master Samaksh Khanna. It includes every single one of the Nalsar non-teaching staff as well, who were always willing to support us, as well as the logistics team, who took on enormous burdens during the debate, the social media team, who were up day in and day out posting, getting us the content. And most importantly, I think the people who carried the event, it was the volunteers. They really showed up. They really made their presence count. They really made us really hopeful of what the future of this tournament holds as well. So thank you all. And lastly, especially keeping in mind how many delays we've had, how late this is running, thank you to all the participants. You put up a fantastic showing this time. We're really grateful for your presence and we hope to see you again next year. Thank you.
Without further ado, I think we can begin with the results now. Our cap, one Shraddha, will be announcing the adjudicators, and Keshav will be awarding the prizes for that.
Yeah, so the way we would do this is we would first announce the top 3 invited adjudicators, and then we would announce the top 3 competing adjudicators at this tournament. But before that, from Ajcor, we want to extend a huge, heartfelt thank you to the organization committee for having pulled off probably the largest in-person tournament in India since COVID ended. And it has been a Herculean task, and they have done an incredible job. Secondly, to our IAs and to our SAs who agreed to the offer to come to this tournament. The reason why we were able to get such a strong judge pool for so many teams, despite it being a 30-room tournament, reflects the quality of the judge pool that India has, but more importantly, the willingness that seniors in the circuit have to give back. We hope that you are back next year also, because Nalsar is India's biggest tournament, and the only way its legacy continues is if its best debaters keep coming back. The third and the most important, I think, is to the young debaters at this tournament. Nalsar is a tournament that has made careers, including mine 4 years ago. So, and I would say that it's a tournament where people can genuinely learn. I hope we were able to provide a good learning experience to you. Please come back next year and keep debating. This is the best tournament in India. Okay. Let's go to the top 3 invited adjudicators for the tournament. Okay. Okay, this is competing judges. The third best judge tied is Ayushman. Is there a trophy for third best judge? Okay.
We invite the Vice Chancellor of the university to give away the prizes, please.
Yeah. The third best tied is also Raj Singh. I think Raj isn't here. Yeah, okay. No worries. And the second best judge at the tournament is Nimesh Sanghi. And the best competing adjudicator at the 15th edition of the Nalsar IV is Mohit Huda.
All right, I will be announcing the top 3 best comp judges of Nalsar IB 2025. Sorry, IAs. Top 3 best judges within the IA pool. All right. Third best IA is Afrina Khan. We request one shadow to give the presents. Okay, prize. All right. The second best IA is Rashdun Ahmed. Sorry, third best? Tied for third best, I apologize. Tied for third best is Rashdun Ahmed. Second best is Aniket Patra. All right. And the best invented adjudicator is Mahesh R. All right, to announce the Novice Speaker Awards, I invite Keshav.
Hi, before I start with the awards, I first want to thank OC for being so nice, accommodative, and hospitable. Then to my co-CAs, first the core adjudicators for being such nice, guiding mentors for me within this tournament. Then Shora for being such a wonderful co-DCA and a roommate for me during the tournament. A shout out to my DevSoc. I'm the only one who's representing it. Next year, hoping all of us do. To the novice best speakers, 7th best novice speaker tied is Anshul Chaudhary. Congratulations. 7th best novice speaker as well, Harshita N. Congratulations again. 7th best novice speaker, Rishang Mehrotra. Again, the 7th best novice speaker, Shivanshi Pandita. Again, the 7th best speaker, Siddhant Parthu. Congratulations. The 5th best novice speaker is Aditya Karmakar and also on a tight position. Joining Aditya is Sadhya Padmanbhan. Sorry, butchering your name. as the 5th best speaker. Third best novice speaker is Swayam Kaura. Congratulations. Third best novice speaker as well, Tamanna Dagar. Congratulations. Second best novice speaker, Aditi Kanadam. Congratulations. And the novice best speaker, Sharna Shangaukar. Congratulations. Now, they are to announce the open best speakers.
If you can, then better. Cool. Sorry for the delays. I know everyone has to leave. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the wonderful OC. Thank you for having all of us. Another shout out to my amazing CAs. I've learned a lot from you. Thank you for having me here as well. And lastly, thank you to VIT DepSoc. I wouldn't have been here without you. Thank you for all of the support you've shown me. Cool. Starting with the open best speakers then. The 10th best speaker is Archit Lahiri. Tied on 10th best is Jerry Joes. And also tied on 10th is Rohan Krishnan. The 9th best speaker is Shaunak Shirgaonkar. The 8th best speaker is Krishank Kohli. Tied for 6th best speaker is Vishwa Raghav Raj. And also tied for 6th best speaker is Yashuvardhan Balakrishnan.
I'll be announcing the other half. And fun fact, it is a 5-way tie for overall best speaker of Nalsar IV 2025. So let's start. First, on the 5-way tie for overall best speaker, Abhinav Mohanty. Next, Harsith, sorry. Next, still at first, Mahor. Last of the two, Naman. And then finally, Shaurya Chandravashi. Come up, and hold your joint trophy.
Before we move on to the novice finalist announcements, I would like to invite our Vice Chancellor, sir, to come and give a few words.
Friends, I really appreciate Ashik and the team for conducting this 15th National Debating Competition of Nalsar. Over the years, it has assumed a greatest importance, and Ashik informs me there are about 120 teams from all over India, and then you have the judges from all over the world are here. There is something in the Indian DNA, 3 things are there. IT. IT means not only information technology. Information technology is India today. India today is information technology. And also debating. And Indians will not agree without debate 3 things. Someone has said, what are the 3 things? One is mangoes in summer, cricket in winter, and without debate, they also accept somebody who is a brilliant Bollywood actor. Anybody can guess who is that? 50 years of that movie is celebrated, 2025. Sholay, Amitabh Bachchan. Okay, so debating is a part of the law school culture also, not just mooting. So I'm happy that we are celebrating this 15th debating competition, and congratulations to Ashik and the team. We look forward to all of you coming again, and then I hope that next year more teams will join. All the best. Thank you.
We are now going on to the most anticipated results of the tournament. The first is the result of the novice final. Unfortunately, the chair could not join us because they have a flight to catch. So can we have Tanishka to announce the result of the novice final if they're here?
All right. Hello, everyone. Tanishka here. So Afreen was chairing novice finals. Alongside, there was Aniket Patra on the panel, Anshuman Patnaik, Harsh Pratap, Rashidun Ahmed, me, and Vansh Chadda. On opening government, we had Ek Brat, Ek Demure. On opening opposition, we had IITB 17, Sophists and Furious. And on closing government, we had Madrasi and Marwari in Secunderabad. And closing opposition, Buri and Aji. Novice runner-ups are IITB 17, Sophists and Furious. The team on opening opposition, are they here? And the novice champions of Nalsar is Ek Brat, Ek Demure with OG with a unanimous call. Thank you. The finals best speaker is DPM Shivanshi Pandita.
Okay. Now to the most anticipated result of the tournament, that is the result of the open final. The chair also could not join us because they have a flight to catch. So can we have Nime Sangi from the panel to announce the result of the open final?
Runners up first. All of this. Hi, everyone. The chair was Mahesh. So in the room on panel with us were Arohi, Banan, Bea, Keshav, and Mohit, and myself. On opening government, we had Adha Lal Salim. On opening opposition, we had Clean Shaven Kazabiyads in Delhi. On closing government, we had ITB 49 Sophies have more trophies than us. And on closing opposition, we had VIT Lahiri and Balakrishnan. After an extremely long deliberation, we were finally able to arrive at a unanimous call. Our OGF runners up are the team on opening government, Adha Lal Salim. Finally, the winners are ITB 49. Sophies have more trophy than us. And the finals best speaker on a 3-2-2 split is DPM.
Okay, and on a last note, thank you so much to our VC sir for being here. Thank you everybody for making this an amazing experience. We hope you had fun, and this is officially calling Nalsar IV, the 15th edition, to a close. Thank you all for being here.
Guys, a few trophies are unclaimed. Can you please come forward, like the finalists and best speakers? We'll just check and give it to you, please. Uh, is the open best speaker here? Is the open best speaker here? Open third best speaker. Open second best speaker.
यार दो तो जीत गए तो उनसे तो हमने बात कर ली एक अभिनव बस्तर दो हम टीममेट्स हैं I'm giving you contact बाकी तो कुछ नहीं so you guys on 2 out of 3 of the
Open
trophy
finalist?
share.
Yeah, open finalist can take it.
Two have rescinded because they won so we 2 out of 3 yeah Mohanty is not there Abhinav Mohanty I don't know where
आपके
this is split 2.3
open finalists. Open finalists. Open finalists, please collect your trophies.
no contestation no contestation it's all yours and Shaurya 2-2 yes
Yeah, open finalists, please collect your trophies. Open second best speaker, open third best speaker. What is all that? What's all that? What's all that? Yes, open semi-finalists. Open semi-finalists if you're here. Open semi-finalists. What else? Novice? What is the other awards? Novice finalists. Novice finalists if you're here. Novice finalists.
We'll remove the base. We'll give the base to Abhinav. We'll get the rest of the trophy to you.
See, if you want this, like we can just cut out the.
yes or he can take the ribbons
Yeah.
Yes, guys.
Okay, what do you guys want us to finally do? Just keep it there? You guys will figure out what that?
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
हो गया लाइव क्लोज कर दो ये नहीं दिया भाई हमने cap can cap step forward please can cap step forward please we have a few mementos for you
Where is the photographer? Photographer.
what are the books you all want to pick pick a book amongst us no I just pick a book amongst yourselves
Just